Linda, the first clue was finding matches from a bar I'd never been to. How the pieces of her betrayal came together to shatter my heart, which had once been full of trust and love. The purpose of the surveillance cameras was to confirm my suspicions, but they ended up capturing more than I had anticipated, revealing the harsh reality of adultery and dishonesty in my home. This story, which combines heartache and technology, is an ode to the pursuit of truth. This is my narrative. Have fun while you watch. Leaning back on the bed, Bill Phillips examined the tiny object that had been causing him such agony. It was a simple object, slightly under 3 inches wide and 2 inches tall, that was still found despite being less common. From the side, it appeared to be a small wedge, just like a typical pack of paper matches. As usual, he found 35 matches inside after opening it and counting them. There were 5 missing, the same number as before. He wondered if it was because he was depressed that he had bothered to count them again. The part of the pack that opened to reveal the matches was plain white and had writing in a vibrant pink color. He initially believed the color to be a light shade of purple, but a co-worker's secretary informed him that it was actually fuchsia. Another person dubbed it magenta. He discovered that both names had the same meaning online. He sensed that seeing this color would always make him feel depressed, but it didn't really matter. There was no map, no address, and no phone number. It was a commercial. He was initially confused by the fancy writing, which simply read the Puma Denver. Sometimes, even now, he wished he had never learned. Sometimes it's better to not know. It would take Bill nearly 60 minutes to call his sister Sandy. Since discovering this simple book of matches 2 months prior, he had made the decision to spend his time contemplating everything. It was Thursday night, almost 9 o'clock at night. It was Eastern Time, Bill Phillips' usual time to call his wife Linda while he was out of town in Colorado Springs. It was only 7 o'clock at night. It was Mountain Time for him, but he had sports on TV after dinner. Bill Phillips, a tall, handsome 37-year-old with brown hair and blue-gray eyes, knew his wife Linda, who was a year younger than him, would be waiting by the phone after speaking with her. He could almost see her, short, dark brown hair, dark eyes, a smile with dimples, and a nice figure at 5 feet 4 inches. He smiled, thinking about being back home with her tomorrow night. Every last week of the month, he visited his company's office in Colorado Springs to work on computers and servers. The local manager helped, but Bill had the skills needed to keep everything running right, just as the company bosses wanted. He had been doing this for a year and a half, ever since his company, Abstract Devices Incorporated, bought a big competitor based in this beautiful city. His trips were always the same, flying from Dayton, Ohio, on a Wednesday afternoon and coming back Friday night. He spent all day Thursday and Friday making sure the software was fully updated and the antivirus was current. It was key that every computer in the firm only had the needed software. The firm had 2 big buildings, one for making stuff and the other for office work. They had lots of computers, plus the main ones controlling them and the stuff linking them all. Making sure everything was right took a lot of time. They made tech for the Army, so they couldn't have any surprises if the Army popped in to check. The Army would do this check once a year with no warning. It was Bill's job to keep things in line so the Army would find nothing wrong. On Wednesday night, Bill called Linda to let her know he had arrived safely and that the weather was much better than the rain back in Ohio. They spoke for about 15 minutes, as usual, and then he spent the rest of the evening going through work emails. 3 hours later, Bill turned off the TV and lights and went to bed. Now it was Thursday night, and he only had one more night left before returning to Dayton. He watched the clock until almost 7 o'clock at night, when he usually called Linda. On the second ring, she answered, saying she had a busy day and was okay. She also managed the sales teams at 4 other locations in Dayton. "I love you," he said, and he hung up. In 15 minutes, he was cozy in bed, watching baseball. Then he realized he hadn't told his wife that his flight would get him home at 7 o'clock in the evening, not the usual 10 o'clock Dayton time. The flight from Colorado Springs was now 3 hours earlier because of a new schedule. He was happy about the change. He found out in time because he checked his ticket, as he had thought it would leave at the usual time. When he called to check, they said the flight had to be earlier to fit new routes. He thought change was good. He'd get home earlier and wanted to ask Linda to go out for a drink and maybe dance for a bit. They hadn't done this on a Friday for a long time. At 9:20, he called home again, but this time Linda didn't answer. He left a message after the phone rang 4 times. He thought maybe she was doing laundry and didn't hear the phone. She often did chores like that when he was on his trip. Soon, he was back into the game and forgot she hadn't picked up. Bill had to leave Colorado Springs early, missing his usual lunch at a diner. Instead, he grabbed a sandwich from a machine, but it wasn't a big deal for him. He also snacked a bit at the Colorado Springs airport while waiting to leave. Bill traveled late, so he quickly left Dayton International Airport and got to his car, parked in the long-term area. He drove home on I-75 South, taking the Miamisburg-Centerville Road exit. It was just before 8 o'clock when Bill arrived at their house on a quiet street in West Carrollton, a suburb southwest of Dayton. It was a nice place, and both he and Linda liked their home. They didn't have to drive far to work, which was great. The house used to belong to Bill's parents, but when they moved to Florida to retire, they gave it to Bill and his sister Sandy. Later, Bill bought Sandy's share, taking a mortgage on the house to do so. He had lived there for 10 years, a year before he and Linda got married. It made sense for them to live together there. With 3 bedrooms, it was big enough for kids later on. Bill wondered if Linda had received his message about going out for a drink when he pulled into the garage, her new Chrysler parked next to his Ford, and he hoped Linda would agree to go out and let him change and shower first, since he needed to clean up after a hectic day that had included an early trip to the airport. After 10 minutes, Bill returned to the bathroom with his wife. Linda tapped the side of the tub and said, "Move some of these candles, then sit here." Bill shifted in the tub to face the location that Linda indicated, and Linda kissed him. He then inquired, "What made you want to try something new?" "Not that I'm upset," his wife replied with a smile. "I read a long piece on how to make your husband happy in a women's magazine, and it talked about how much guys like the full deal." She paused, then continued, "I also asked Denise about it, mentioning her friend." Bill's smile dimmed a little. Denise Grady was an old friend of his wife's, a divorcee who, when not selling houses, seemed to try to charm any man she met. She once grabbed his buttocks in front of Linda and just laughed when he objected. Denise was what his dad would have called a fake blonde, 38 years old, a woman whose body had been altered through surgery to make her chest bigger. "So you're saying I should thank Denise for the nice time we had?" He didn't like her readiness to date a married man as much as a single one. He and Linda had a few arguments about him not wanting her to spend time with Denise. "You know how I feel about that, Linda?" Linda said, getting up in the tub and using a handheld shower head to rinse off the soap before answering, "I know you don't like Denise, but she's not that bad." Bill assisted her with this task, and after they were done, he helped her get out of the tub and enjoyed drying her off with one of the soft towels she had laid out on the counter. Not wanting to stay in the small bathroom, he took her hand and led her to their large bed, where she complied without protest. On Saturday morning, Bill woke up first. He lay there thinking about last night when he and his wife had tried all the sex things they could think of, some even twice. They fell asleep more because they were tired and happy than anything else. He smiled, thinking about how free his wife had been. He had been awake for a few minutes trying to think back on the night when he realized he needed to pee. He got up carefully to not wake his wife. Once in the bathroom, he peed, then washed and brushed his teeth. As he was putting his toothbrush away, he saw the candles still around the room. He started to pick them up and put them where Linda usually keeps them. That's when he saw 5 burned matches on the vanity. At first, he thought Linda might have burned the surface, but when he picked them up, he could tell they were wet and that she probably put them out by running water over them. He threw them away and then picked up the book of matches that was lying there. He didn't smoke and didn't usually need matches, so it was odd that he looked at the matches before putting them on the shelf with the candles. There were a couple of matchbooks already there, ones that his wife must have got for her scented candles. The matchbook in his hand was very plain white with writing on one side but no other marks. The writing was fancy and just said the Pumas Denver. It seemed like a strange name to him, and probably for that reason alone, he would remember what was written on the matches. He put it on the shelf with the rest. When the conversation slowed down, Bill asked, "Ever heard of something called the Pumas Den?" During his Monday coffee break, he recalled the matches he discovered in their bathroom. He was having coffee with 4 guys and 2 women, as they often did. Dan saw the name on some matches but didn't know what it was. Everyone said no or just shook their heads. Soon they were talking about something else. Later that day, Bill looked through phone books for the Pumas Den but found nothing. He even searched online with no luck. Most people would have stopped there, but not Bill. He liked to get to the bottom of things at work, and this puzzle was no different. He kept thinking about finding the source of the matches as they ate dinner that night. Then he asked his wife, "How come I missed you when I called on Thursday?" "I take it you got my message." Linda was prepared with her response when he returned to the table. "I had just talked to you and went to shower before bed," she said. Thankfully, he laughed and went to get steak sauce, missing the brief expression of concern on her face. "It didn't ring at all. I received your message early in the day. You're staying longer than anticipated, then?" "It was a new time they set," the airline representative said, to which Bill laughed. "I felt fortunate to notice the change on my ticket because I was so accustomed to the previous time and would have missed my return home." They continued to eat, and before long they were enjoying a chocolate cake that Linda had made over the weekend. Bill began to think about the matchbook, saying, "Linda, this matchbook was from the Pumas Denver. I found it when I was cleaning up the candles in the bathroom on Saturday." "What is that?" "I've never heard of it." This time, he looked at Linda when he asked. He saw a quick look of shock or maybe fear cross her face. It was a swift change from how she normally looked, and it struck him as odd. She quickly said, "I have no idea, Bill. Even where I got those matches is a mystery to me." "Perhaps." After finishing her cake, she said, "I picked them up somewhere, probably at work." Just as she was about to say that, she got up to gather some used dishes from the table and put them in the dishwasher. As she concluded her speech, he was unable to see her face. He could have ignored it if he hadn't been so curious, but instead he made a mental note to remember it for later. Though he was unsure, he had the impression that his wife was withholding some information from him regarding the matchbook. After almost a decade of marriage, he was accustomed to Linda's typical behavior, so her response didn't seem typical to him. In the hopes that someone might recognize them, Bill tucked the matchbook into his pocket the following morning before leaving for work. For the most of the day, they were kept in his pocket. He reached into his pocket for his knife late that day, thinking of the matches. He had a bad chip in his nail that bothered him, and he wanted to use the knife to cut it off. He pulled out the matches and gave them another glance when his hand found them. He showed them around and inquired as to whether anyone knew them when he entered the main office a little while later. Nobody did. He did discover that they were either a bright pink or a somewhat deep pink in color. Another person believed it to be more purple pink. He had to inform the tech support staff about new software that all of the computers required during the last portion of his workday. He had tech people to handle that work. He wasn't going to do it himself. There were 3 tech guys there when he arrived, and he asked them where the matches were coming from before he left. The 2 older guys, Jason and Carl, merely cast a quick glance before returning to their work, but Jim, a young man recently out of school, grinned to see them. Jim glanced at Bill and said, "Yep, I know that spot." "Where'd you find them?" "I'd bet you've never been there." He chuckled. Then, perplexed, Bill inquired, "Why wouldn't I have been?" Jim smiled even wider and said, "You don't fit there, proud. You're either too old or not the right gender." This further perplexed Bill, who then responded, "You'll have to tell me more, Jim. I found these matches and was just curious. I don't even know what the name means. Can you tell me?" Jim looked at Bill to see if he would respond, then laughed once more before stating, "Well, a puma is a big wild cat, but it's also another word for a cougar." "You know, a cougar, that's a name for an older lady who likes younger guys," Bill continued, his face not showing any indication that he understood what was being discussed. "The Puma Den is a bar on the east side. It's on Indian Ripple Road just after it turns from East Dorothy Lane, just west of where I-675 crosses." Bill's face finally showed that he had it. "And have you been there? You seem to know it well." "I tried to look it up, but couldn't find it listed." The employee replied, "Yeah, I've been a few times. I ended up with some bruises from being pinched by an eager cougar. I had a few of them take me home. In fact, I went home with one each time I was there. Then I met my wife and stopped going to Puma's Denver. I hadn't thought about it for a couple of years. Talking about it recalls some memories. As for not finding it, the place likes to keep it quiet. They don't even say it's a bar on their sign, and the sign is quite small. They seem to rely on people talking about it. A guy in my dorm told me about it." Though looking a little pale and nervous, he could tell Bill was really into it, so he continued, "Like I said, you're either too old or not the right fit. Their guests are single or divorced women from about 35 to 60 and young guys. They call these young guys cubs, up to their mid to late 20s. Jim continued, "Yes, that's the idea. A lot of the frat boys from Dayton University or Wright State go there for fun. The women often buy them their drinks. It's not a big spot. The place could fit around 100 people, but it gets really busy later in the week. Oddly, Saturday isn't the top night. I always thought Wednesday to Friday were the peak times to go there." Bill interrupted, "Did you say the young guys are called cubs?" And after giving it some thought, he said, "I guess that fits with the cougar idea." Their conversation had led Bill to inquire, "Is that the only folks they see, older women after younger men? Are they all single or divorced?" "Yep, that seems to be their main crowd. The drinks cost a lot, likely because when a woman picks a younger man, they often want to leave fast. There are some pretty women there, and when a man spots one, he tries to get away with her as soon as possible to avoid being noticed by other men. It can be a little harsh at times. Many women are there merely to dance to the music, but they all have the same goal in mind, and once they start liking a guy, most of them leave." They chatted long enough, and Bill thanked Jim for the information before leaving. A little while later, he said, "I don't think they check if you're married, so there might be some married women looking for something extra." Now concerned about how Linda obtained the matches, he returned them to his pocket. Though her friend Denise Grady seemed like she would fit right in, he couldn't believe she would go there. Bill had frequently expressed to his wife that he didn't like her friend, and he now questioned whether he should be concerned. He didn't trust Denise, but he did trust Linda. He hoped Denise had simply forgotten the matches at home. Jim realized why a woman might find him attractive as he turned to leave. Jim was a handsome man with a distinct rebel look, highlighted by a fine tattoo on his arm and a sliver of hair under his lip. He attempted to visualize Jim and his spouse Linda, but it proved to be unsatisfactory. That day, Bill arrived home somewhat ahead of his wife. He started by returning the matches to their original location on the bathroom shelf. He cared about Linda's paper matches, and he didn't want her to see. They had a great time out at the Alibi Club for dinner that evening. After dinner, Linda even insisted on having a drink at the bar next door, where they spent an hour and a half dancing and sipping their drinks gradually. Upon returning home, she once more demonstrated to him the benefits of practice, even in sexual relations. She used her mouth exactly as she had earlier, making him feel the same way again. She took away his memory of the matches from the bar. If his wife hadn't distracted him with other thoughts, Bill might not have continued to think about those matches. But he continued to think about matches and what they might mean even after spending the first 2 weeks at home. He continued to consider it more and more over time, but he was unable to get rid of the thought or accept that Linda had actually visited that bar. He also had a hard time figuring out how else she could have gotten them. Bill ultimately began to wonder if Denise had brought the matches to their home from her visit with Linda, or if Denise had given them to Linda for her candles. Though, to be honest, he wasn't entirely sure. Bill tried to convince himself that Linda might ask Denise for matches to keep in the bathroom so she'd have them when needed. His level of trust fluctuated dramatically. It was Monday, the 10th day before his weekend trip to Colorado Springs. While Linda was cleaning the house, Bill had been busy outside, trying to get his mind off his concerns about Linda being loyal to him. He had been up thinking about these things for a number of nights, until 2 a.m. He made the decision on Monday to show himself that everything was well. This decision allowed him to finally fall asleep. Bill went down to speak with Jason Shields and Technical Services at a little after 10:30 a.m. due to their work with military equipment. Jason was well versed in the spy gear that their company utilized to monitor the parking lot and interior of their buildings. Bill asked to speak with Jason in a meeting room even though Jason was by himself when he arrived. For the portion of the company that dealt with computer safety and security, this wasn't strange. Jason was a large man, standing over 6 feet tall, with dark hair that gradually turned gray. Despite his tough exterior, which included a deep voice and stern expression, Bill knew that Jason was actually a kind and knowledgeable man. Bill addressed the matter directly. A security concern made Bill ask, "What's up?" Bill was not sure where to begin, but at last he said, "I need your secret advice on a tricky case that's not work-related." Jason immediately said, "No problem at all. You've been great to me, and I'm here to help if I can." Jason was prepared to listen to Bill's worries. It was now Bill's turn to talk about his concerns, to voice them aloud, but he resisted. Speaking of it could make it seem even more real, he feared. "I'm not sure what I need. Maybe you can give me an idea. I want to know if there's a simple way to listen in on my house. I feel edgy just asking. I need to know if something shady is happening there when I'm away." Bill became increasingly uneasy as he continued. Jason got it right away and replied, "I get where you're coming from, Bill. You might not know, but I got a divorce 18 months back. It was the spy gear I set up that showed me my wife was cheating with our neighbor. Someone else." "I thought Bill was a friend," I replied. Bill gave a nod. "That's what I need. I'm not sure if anything's wrong, but I'm losing my mind not knowing. My reasons to doubt are thin, but still." The elderly gentleman pointed to 2 chairs and replied, "Let's sit here and talk about what's bothering you." Bill found the idea logical and promptly shared his concerns. "I went through something like this with my wife, so maybe I can help a bit. But I know everyone's story is different. I don't have solid proof. It all began when I found a box of matches in my bathroom from a place I'd never heard of. It's a bar named The Promised Inn. I got the lowdown from Jim, the new guy at your work. Long story short, it's a bar for older women to meet young guys. I can't see my wife, Linda, going to such a place, but I need to find out. She has a friend who's divorced and might be a bad influence. Last week, I looked online for tips on how to spot if your spouse might be cheating. Only a few things felt true for me. The main thing is that recently, my wife wants sex more. From what I read, this might mean she's trying to throw me off or fix something." Bill hesitated, then continued. He shifted in his seat and said, "I know it sounds weird to complain about that, but another thing I read was if she starts liking things in bed she used to not like." The younger man then became serious again, adding, "There was also the night I called home when I was away and she didn't pick up. She had a reason for it, but I don't know if it's true. And I think she lied when I asked about the matches from the Promised Inn." He continued, "I know this might not be a lot, and maybe I got it all mixed up, but this is really bothering me. I need to prove to myself that I'm wrong about all of this." At that point, Bill realized he had been tensely leaning forward and leaned back. Jason was silent for a while before speaking. "I don't think you're totally off base, but you might not have as much to go by as I did. Still, being worried isn't silly. In my case, my big hint was my wife working late a lot, but her pay wasn't going up. I put tiny cameras in the living room and bedroom, and I tapped the phone. I caught a call of her planning to meet our neighbor at the Red Roof near the highway. That's close to you, right? Bill smiled. Yeah, I pass it every day to work and back. Jason persisted. The cameras didn't catch much, but the phone call helped me catch them at the hotel, going in and coming out. One night, seeing them kiss and touch outside was enough. 22 years just gone. The kids are with me, they want nothing to do with her. They're in college, and these were supposed to be our best years. I'm not sure where she's living now, maybe near Detroit with her sister. The neighbor got divorced too, but didn't stay with my ex. His wife got a lot from him because they had an agreement she could use against him. It was about how if he cheated, he wouldn't get much from their things. He realized he was off topic and quickly laughed before going on. That's enough about my issue. You're here for my help, not to hear about my problems. Jason paused for a moment before saying, I think I have just what you need. There's some new gear that came out, and I just read about it. It's got great sound and picture and can connect to a computer with Wi-Fi. They're tiny but give out very good quality. He got up and said, let me grab one of the magazines from my desk. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Before he left, Jason said, you know, I'd lend you the 2 cameras I had, but I gave them to a buddy. I still have the phone recorder though, and I'll bring it tomorrow. It's good, and you can give it back when you're done. It took Jason a little longer to locate the magazine he was thinking of, and Bill considered his options for placing spy gadgets once more. Everything changed when Jason returned, even though he thought he had everything planned. Entering the room, waving the magazine, and taking a seat across from Bill, Jason exuded confidence. He opened it, turned to a page, and showed Bill. This little gadget is amazing. It sends sound and video to a PC or network through Wi-Fi, and a PC can set it up. It can work on battery or be plugged in. You can even get ones that look like a clock radio, a plug-in air freshener, or a carbon monoxide checker. After examining the advertisement details, the 2 men went to grab Jason's laptop to visit the manufacturer's website. They learned even more about the features and options available on the website. Bill nodded and grinned a little. This gear seems perfect for me. Do you know how fast we can get it? I'd like it ready before my trip in 10 days. Jason discovered there was a dealer in Cincinnati after quickly exploring the website further. I've dealt with this seller before. We could probably have them ship whatever you want fast overnight. Shouldn't be hard. Plus, I know their sales rep pretty well. Her name's Heidi Westerber. We were both teens back in Xenia. Jason stopped and reflected on the wall. I think she lost her husband a while ago. Maybe I can use your order as a way to reconnect. Not just as buyer and seller, but man and woman. We actually dated back then, Jason continued as Bill was about to finish. Let's pick what you need, and we can order today. Hopefully, it will be here by tomorrow. Bruce abruptly stopped talking. After discussing Bill's options, they selected 4 excellent gadgets. By noon, Bill had returned to his office, placed the order, and used his card to make the payment. Jason was already enjoying a catch-up conversation with Heidi when he departed. The following day, Bill received his order of viewing equipment and used his leisure time to inspect it and review the guides. He wrote the company's strict rules, and if they hadn't stopped him, he would have installed the software and tested the equipment then. As promised, Jason had brought the phone recorder along with a guide. Simply plug the recorder into a wall socket and insert a phone into it to begin using it. He noticed that a basic memory card could hold a lot of talks that the batteries could record. He was quite pleased with the premium equipment's apparent quality and usefulness. He took the next day off before the end of the day. At that time, Tommy intended to install and test the cameras. Thus, he ended up having a light breakfast at an IHOP the following morning. He waited long enough for his wife to leave for work, but he kept his day off from her for obvious reasons. He wanted to use the opportunity to set up and fine-tune the watch system. He returned home by 9:15, his car hidden in the garage. He got to work quickly setting things up. The first gadget was a tiny 1" by 2" by 4" black metal box camera. It had a small power plug and a tiny Wi-Fi stick on the back. Using double-sided tape, he attached the camera to the side of their living room stereo. It was powered by the same strip as their other recreational equipment. Bill assumed it would monitor the front door area, the majority of the living room, and a portion of the kitchen. Then he installed a second camera in their master bedroom. This time, the gadget was installed inside a clock radio that appeared typical and functioned perfectly. Other than the possibility that it contained additional cover to shield the components from outside signals, Bill didn't think it appeared to be spy gear. It was powered by the same source as the clock radio. Its only distinguishing features from the one it replaced were a few minor alterations to the front and a retractable, short Wi-Fi stick. Once it was set up, their old clock radio was thrown in a box and stored in the garage. Bill didn't even think his spouse would notice the switch. Both of them had shifted from using the alarm on it to relying more on the alarms on their phones. If they woke up in the middle of the night, they used it primarily to check the time. The guest room was equipped with a third camera, identical to the one in their room. It had never had a clock radio in it, but Bill doubted his wife would notice. In fact, he thought it unlikely that Linda would even notice the new arrival in a matter of weeks. The basement game room was visited by the fourth camera. He wanted one down there too, but they didn't go down there much, really only when guests were over. He fixed this one to the side of the TV box on the TV stand because it wasn't hidden. He probably wouldn't have noticed it if he hadn't placed it there himself. There was an old phone downstairs that they hardly ever used, so Bill decided to set it up there as well. The phone plug was hidden behind the couch, out of sight. After arranging everything, Bill stopped for a quick break and a cup of coffee. Subsequently, he examined every room using newly acquired audio and video monitoring equipment to gauge their level of concealment. None were particularly noticeable. Bill found it easy to install the software and figure out how to use it. He watched live from his living room by noon. The video was evident right away. By 1 o'clock, he eventually mastered the art of optimizing the image and configuring the motion detector. The motion would begin on the camera and continue for 2 minutes after it stopped. He proceeded to store the footage on his computer. He reset the system once everything was just the way he wanted it. The camera would now wait for motion before turning on. He gave it a try by getting a snack and then spending some time in the living room before heading out. After returning to his home office, where the computer and watch were located, he waited for the video to stop for 2 minutes before viewing the self-portrait. The video equipment was excellent, but he noticed that the audio could only record sound up to a distance of roughly 15 feet. He took his time, and almost an additional hour passed while he set up the final 3 cameras, gave them a test, and then reviewed each test result. Everything went as planned. He spent a few minutes in each of the 4 watched rooms and then went over all the results once more as his final test of the watch system. Everything appeared to function properly. He did consider the possibility that his hard drive was running out of space, so he chose to test that concern by leaving the system alone for a few days. He rang his secretary on the kitchen phone to check the phone recorder. It was just a quick call to check in. He had a phone conversation with himself for a second check, using his cell phone to call his home number. It was only a minute or so, but he felt that was sufficient. He quickly switched out the memory card for the recorder that Jason had given him. He then connected the card containing his test calls to his desktop computer at home. Using headphones, he listened and could hear that the calls had been well recorded. Though he assumed his wife wouldn't return before 5 o'clock, he left the house well in advance of that time in case she did. Linda would occasionally leave work early to avoid the traffic. All set, he closed and resumed the program, reset the recordings, and stepped out for 15 minutes. He read news online and drank coffee at a quiet internet cafe during that time. The remainder of the week and the following weekend went by without incident. Linda didn't appear to notice the other 2 spy gadgets or the new clock radios. If she did, though, Bill had his narrative ready. He would tell her he got the clock radios at a discount store if she inquired about them. He was going to tell her a lie and tell her the other two devices were for keeping the house safe. He would claim to have heard of several break-ins in the area. Bill questioned whether his computer could hold all the data after the 4 cameras operated nonstop for 5 days. In addition to his daily tasks, he made sure to check the amount of free space on his computer. He quickly transferred the audio files to his iPod and changed the memory cards in the phone recorder late on Sunday. It performed exactly as the manual had predicted. That evening, he did not listen to the recordings. He was going to check them the following day at work. He didn't want his wife to see him watching a video in their bedroom, and he didn't have time to look through the video files. Even with his quick 3-day trip to Colorado Springs coming up on Monday, he was relieved to see that these files wouldn't take up too much space on his hard drive. He eagerly told Jason Shields how well the cameras and their software fulfilled his needs when they met. "Thank you, Jason. It looks like your friend in Cincinnati sells good stuff. Let her know the phone recorder is working great. I have the past 5 days of sound on my iPod, and I've started listening today. So far, just normal talks." "That's a relief," Jason said with a grin. "I should be thanking you, Bill. I've talked to Heidi a few times since we made that order, and we have a dinner for Friday. I'm taking off early Friday afternoon to get ready and drive to Cincinnati. I'll pick her up at her place at 5:30. If we hadn't talked about cheating spouses or, in your case, thinking your wife might be cheating, I might not have thought about getting to know Heidi again." Not now, at least. Jason and Bill laughed as they discussed how they might get along. They both thought that the talk would bring them happiness. You could find a way back to Heidi, and I could stop worrying about Linda, they believed. They grinned and shook hands, knowing that by Saturday, they would have some idea of what lay ahead. Bill excused himself from work early on Monday at 3 p.m., citing personal matters to attend to. In reality, though, he was just checking the audio and video after a week of recording. Before clearing them to make room, he wanted to make sure they functioned properly when he wasn't around. Having listened to every call on his iPod, he didn't find anything strange in his wife's conversations. However, he suspected that she might make calls on her cell that she didn't want him to hear. Everything was working as it should. He could browse through and view portions of all 4 files. However, he discovered that voices farther than 15 feet from the microphone were not well captured. He checked, deleted all the files, and restarted the system. Before his trip, he intended to repeat this. He was a little disappointed that he had to remove the footage of them cuddling in their room. Later on, he realized he had the equipment and could figure out a way to tell Linda that it was old equipment he had from his job, so they could make all kinds of amusing movies together. He hoped that plan would sit well with her. Linda arrived home as usual, not realizing that her husband had returned earlier than expected. They prepared a delicious supper and watched a movie they had stored from the previous weekend during the evening. They discussed what they had seen while sitting on the couch after the film. Linda remarked, "That was a fun movie, wasn't it, Bill? I love movies where the main characters are kids." "It was great, Linda," he said, putting his arm around her. He touched her face and, as she turned to face him, planted a kiss on her. "You know, these kid movies don't usually have much grown-up love stuff, but this one did." "Did it make you think of anything?" he asked. She instantly returned the kiss. They were smitten after that first kiss, and it continued for a while. "I've been wanting to talk about something, and that movie made me think of it more. I've been thinking we should start trying for kids. What do you think?" Linda finally said, stopping and kissing him deeply without waiting for a response. It took her a minute to release her grip. "Wow, Linda, you haven't kissed me like that in a long time. We should watch movies more often," he said with a grin. He didn't forget her question but didn't get to answer before she said, "It has been a while, Bill, but it's not just on me. You've been all into your work for a good while. But you didn't answer me. What do you think?" Bill took a moment before he answered, "I've always wanted kids, Linda, you know that. If you're sure, you won't hear me say no." He chuckled and said, "I'm not the one on the pill." Linda kissed him again, this one quicker and with less heat, then said, "I mean it, Bill. We've talked about this a lot, and you've always said it's up to me, but I think I'm ready now. My job's getting on my nerves, and I wouldn't mind leaving it. Maybe it's the right time to think about having kids." The days before Bill's trip to Colorado Springs flew by. Bill had almost stopped checking the 4 cameras he put up in the house, and he hardly thought about them while at home. It seemed like Linda hadn't seen them, or at least he had no clue she had found one. Bill usually went to the airport straight from work, but this Wednesday he left an hour early to go home, delete the old files, and restart the spying program just to be safe. He also put new batteries in the phone recorder and changed the memory card. He moved the old memory card's files to his computer before wiping it and stashing it in a drawer. In a way, he wished he could put the software on his work laptop because then he could watch the cameras online, but instead, he had to wait until he got home to see what his secret spying had caught. That morning, Linda woke him up half an hour early in a very nice way. He found it a wonderful way to start the day and wasn't shocked when she kept going until the end. "That should last you until Friday night," she said. Bill Phillips felt really uneasy and worried as he flew from Dayton to Colorado Springs that Wednesday afternoon. He was glad he'd win 2 hours flying west because it allowed him to think about work stuff. By heading straight to the Colorado Springs office as soon as he landed, like always, he got a rental car and drove to their smaller company's office without stopping at the hotel first. As he stepped out of the elevator on the 3rd floor, Louis Dempster, the boss there, met him. "Whoa, Bill, are you all right? You look like you're going to be sick right here on our floor." Bill knew Louis often spoke plainly, but this welcome was a bit much. Bill gave a small smile and said, "I'll be fine." He wondered if maybe he ate something bad on the plane, like a weird peanut from the free snack pack. Louis seemed unsure but let it go with, "Okay, Bill, want some Alka-Seltzer or some other stomach fixer? I think the vending machine has some." Bill really tried to brush it off and shook his hand, saying, "I'm okay, don't fret, Louis, it's probably nothing." Bill spent an hour catching up on the big problems that had come up over the month since his last trip. Then, he left to check into his hotel. He pulled down the work emails he got while away from Dayton and reports of the local stuff he needed to check. In a way, it was okay. He didn't have to pick anything for an hour because he couldn't guess at all how his work would be seen, thinking about Linda, what was up in Dayton, if anything, and what he'd find on his computer when he got back was messing with him. After he checked in, Bill went to eat at the place near the lobby like always, but this time he could hardly eat. He used to enjoy a small meal here. He thought it was the clean air from the Rockies that made him hungry whenever he came to Colorado Springs. About 20 minutes before 7, he left his half-eaten food, paid, and went to his room. He knew he had to call Linda like he always did, and he felt so stressed he might throw up the little he ate. Bill had finally listened to Louis and got a roll of antacid pills. He also got ginger ale, his mom's go-to for a sick belly. Before he called, he ate 4 pills and drank half the can. He wasn't sure if it was his trying to fix himself or just wanting to feel better on his own, but when he called Linda at the right time, he felt okay. On the second ring, she picked up with, "Hi honey, how was your flight?" Linda always said that when he called, letting him know she was waiting for his call. "How do you do, dear? My flights were good as usual," even though he tried not to say it. He went on, "Aren't you scared to pick up the phone like that? What if your boy had called? He'd be so confused." "Bill, how can you make jokes like that? Stop it, well, I don't have a boyfriend." Linda looked really upset by what he said. It took her a bit longer than Bill thought it should to answer back. Bill started to feel sick again thinking about it. "I'm just kidding, Linda. Don't be mad," he said, not knowing what else to say, and then he took a big drink of his ginger ale. Linda gave a small laugh, seeming okay to move on. "I'm happy you don't have to take the late flight back this week. It'll be nice having you back home early." They went on talking about other stuff, but Bill wasn't really listening. His mind was stuck on the same thing it had been for too many days. After he hung up, he sat in front of the TV for 2 hours, seeming to watch the baseball game, but really, he was lost in thought about his last night in Colorado Springs, the night he left a message at home. He thought a lot about the cameras he set up. He worried if he reset them right, scared his PC might break. He felt he couldn't wait another month to see if something was going on at home while he was away. Close to his usual bedtime, and though it was still bright outside, he went to bed. The sun had gone down behind the Rockies. Bill noticed it got dark faster in Colorado Springs compared to Ohio. That night he thought he'd stay awake with his thoughts, but he fell asleep quick, worn out from the day. His stomach felt better too, and just before he slept, he wondered if the antacids or the ginger ale fixed it. Due to the time change, the next morning Bill woke up early, feeling fresh and less worried if anything bad happened while he slept. He couldn't change it now. After a good breakfast, which he missed the day before, he went to work, ready for a long day. When he got off the elevator, there was Louis Dempster. Bill often thought Louis had someone telling him when he arrived, or maybe Louis just hung around near the elevators. "Morning, Bill. You look better. Ready for today?" "I'm good now. Might have been bad food. Didn't get to the reports, so today's extra busy." The two headed to their usual meeting room. Bill knew Louis tried to be nice to him, like holding the door to the meeting room, which he did again. In Bill's head, it felt a bit too much like sucking up, but since it wasn't too obvious, he couldn't quite decide. Even after months of being in Colorado Springs for work, the day flew by for Bill as he tried hard to focus on his work instead of thinking about the video files piling up on his computer back in Dayton. Because of their joint efforts, they were a bit early in their schedule by day's end. Bill's stomach was doing okay, and this time he managed to eat all his food before making his nightly call. Right at 7 o'clock, he called his home, and his wife's voice answered after 2 rings. She sounded very happy, and they skipped talking about the boyfriend remark Bill had made the evening before. They chatted for nearly 10 minutes before it was time to hang up. This time it was Bill who led their final words. "Well, honey, I should let you go. I've got nothing else, just that I love you and hope you head to bed soon. This call is done." Bill felt Linda seemed a bit rushed in her response. "I'll head to bed soon. Love you too, honey. I know it's early for bed for you, but have a good night's sleep. Bye, dear." "Good night, Linda." Bill didn't wake up on Friday morning until his cell phone alarm rang. Unlike the last night, he had tossed and turned for hours, his thoughts troubling him. Linda's slight stutter during their last talk had him all worried. Instead of feeling calm, he noticed his stomach was acting up. Louis quickly saw the change in Bill and loudly commented on it, but Bill shrugged off his concerns, and they both dived into work, tackling the remaining tasks before Bill's trip back home from Colorado Springs. Once again, the day was a wrap for Bill, and this time, he and Louis even got their work done early. Bill could leave for the airport sooner, not in a rush at all. He gave back his rental car, checked in, and even had time for a quick bite at a small food place. He tried not to worry about Linda and what he might find on his videos or the phone recorder. Nothing he could do right then. He almost called home again the night before to see if Linda was there, but he didn't, partly because he was scared she might not be, and partly because he didn't want to spook her if she was up to something. He really hoped to figure it all out because he wasn't sure he could handle another month of stress. He thought maybe she wasn't cheating this week by chance, but no bad stuff on the videos or calls wouldn't mean all was okay. He decided to wait until he had proof before making any moves. Best case, no weird calls, and he'd see her go to bed alone while he was gone. He knew she might go out to meet someone, like at a motel, but the videos would show when she left and came back. Anything strange would stand out to him, and then he'd have to figure out what to do. Bill got home at the same time as a month ago. Linda's car was there, and he went into their kitchen quietly as usual. He thought about sneaking past their room to check his computer for what happened while he was away, but he couldn't ignore Linda. As he got close to their door, she heard him and called out, "I'm waiting for you, love. Come get clean. I want you here with me in bed." Just 5 minutes before, he could hear her happy laugh from their room. He had to choose: either he feared the worst and would find a way to avoid being close with Linda, or he acted like all was well, really hoping for that truth. Opening their bedroom door wasn't as hard a choice as he thought. Linda's candles gave off enough light for him to see her lying there, facing him in a thin, short blue nightie. It was one she hadn't worn in a long time, one he almost forgot she had. "Wow, Linda, it's been ages since I saw that. I've missed it." Seeing her like this pushed his worries about her being unfaithful away. She knew just how to get his attention. "How fast can you get clean and come here, love?" She smiled at him. Bill quickly took off his clothes and went to the shower. He noticed candles around the bathroom, all put out right before he got in. He spotted a pack of matches on the vanity, and it wasn't the one that had him worried at first. After a quick shower, he glanced at the shelf where their candles and matches were. He noticed the matches from the Puma's den were now at the bottom. He half thought they'd be gone when he went into their room. Linda asked, "How was your day, love? I know these trips are tough for you. You look so tired." He really wanted to say that his worry about her and if she was keeping secrets made him feel stressed, but he said, "I'll be okay now that I'm back with you." While showering, Bill wondered if his doubts about his wife would change how he felt about being close to her. He had been so worried for the last 3 days, but lying beside her without clothes, he found he didn't need to worry after all. "What did you get me from Colorado Springs, dear?" Linda asked. They were about to make love. Linda's true love for him made him forget his fears. He slept well that night. In the morning, he thought about sneaking off to check the video files, but Linda woke up too and stopped him. "Why not stay in bed, Bill? I'll shower quick and make us a big breakfast." She looked a bit worried as she said, "I know you were busy in Colorado Springs, especially since the flight home is 3 hours earlier now. You must have had to work even harder." Bill softly said yes to her idea, then watched her walk to the bathroom, her hips moving gently. When she closed the door, he closed his eyes too and quickly fell into a shallow sleep. He hadn't been asleep for long when a soft kiss and a whisper woke him up. "Sorry to wake you, Bill. Breakfast is ready for you after your shower." When he got to the kitchen, Linda had made his best-loved breakfast and put it on the table: 2 eggs, sausages, hash browns, and toast. This was his favorite, but they hardly ever had time to make it. Usually, it was just cereal and coffee with Linda in the morning. Bill thanked Linda deeply for making breakfast. "It's going to be great, as always," he said. He kissed her quickly and sat down to eat before it got cold. Linda said she wished she could make this every day. "You should have it." They had no chance to talk about going to his office to check the audio and video files. He couldn't even get to the basement to look at the phone line recorder. After a small lunch at almost 1 p.m., Linda said she wanted to go to Dayton Mall to find a gift for her parents' 40th anniversary. She told Bill they were expected there on Sunday afternoon, something he knew for weeks but had forgotten about, caught up in his worries about his wife. They talked a bit about what gifts to buy, but in the end, he let Linda decide. Linda left for the mall around 1:30. Just before she went through the door to the garage, she told him finding the right gift might take some time. He quickly said it was okay, glad for the chance to check his spy setup. As soon as Bill heard the garage door close, he got up from the table and headed straight for his computer room, feeling nervous and worried. The first thing he did after opening the door was check if his computer was on. He was mostly glad it was on, though a small part of him wished it hadn't recorded anything while he was gone. It didn't take long for him to see there were 4 big video files waiting. In seconds, he stopped the camera feed and started the program to watch all 4 videos at the same time on his screen. The program showed a bit from each video at the start. It knew which video started first and would switch between them as needed if there was action in all 4 places at the same time. He could watch all 4 videos at once. Bill could also fast forward, seeing a series of pictures from the videos on each of the 4 screens. If a camera caught Bill's eye, he just had to tap on the small screen to make it big and fill the full view. He could zip through, showing a fast set of pictures, or watch the video slowly in full size. A time and date showed in the bottom right. He started with slow views of himself going out on Wednesday after fixing the system, then let the 4 small views speed by. Now and then, he paused on a live shot to see the time, then watched all 4 at normal speed. As it got close to 9 p.m. on Wednesday, he saw his wife use the kitchen phone and could catch enough words to know some of what they talked about that night. He really wanted to see what happened next, but as he watched, it was clear that after his wife ended the call, she did normal things, cleaning up the kitchen and their room until at 10 p.m., she took off her clothes, went to shower, and then hit the bed. 2 minutes after she reached to turn off the lamp by the bed, the video cut off soon after when all 4 views went dark. New action started in their room. When he made the view big, he saw it was now Thursday morning and his wife was up at her usual time for work by 4 to 9 o'clock. She had left, and all views were dark again. Soon, images came back fast, and a quick look told him it was footage of his wife coming home from work at 5 p.m. All was normal until, while speeding through, he noticed odd things happening. He quickly stopped and went carefully to the start of the odd action. At 8 o'clock, it seemed his wife went into the bathroom with clothes she got from a drawer near their bed.